All right, guys, and welcome back to Invariance.Poker podcast. This will be our 7th podcast, and today we are actually starting a special series. We'll call it Personal Transformation Through Poker. And today I have Dylan here, who's a new poker player that I'm going to actually try to work on him to increase his game. So tell us a little about yourself, Dylan.
I've been playing poker for probably about 9 months. Right now I'm playing a lot of Poker House. I usually play 1-2, but sometimes I play 2-5. And, whenever someone says that they could coach me or teach me things, I'm always happy to learn, so I'm happy to be here.
Awesome. So before, when a lot of people have asked me to coach them in the past, and I have declined every one of them. But I'm actually taking you on for free. Whereas most people, I tell them, even if they pay me, let's say $200, $300 an hour, I wouldn't even coach them because there's a lot of different reasons. Number one is, as you get older, it's harder for you to be coached. You could say coachable. And then if I were to coach players, I would actually introduce competition into my game. So that's some of the reasons why I didn't. Whereas my goal to do this is because they say the future is in the youth, and this is this is actually my personal contribution to the poker world and community by developing a good kid like you and bring him through the progress and make you come out to be good human beings. So here's why that is hard to coach older poker players versus young poker players, because older poker players tend to have a lot of bad habits and tendencies that is hard to break, whereas younger kids, you have a blank canvas. You haven't developed thought process and patterns that you're stuck with, and so we don't have to worry about breaking habits. We just worry about developing new habits, and your thought process is clear and clean. So that's the reason why that I think coaching younger kids is better and more productive. So do you have anything to say before we get started with this?
I don't know. Sometimes I'm playing with some people, and there's one guy, this old guy, who played really bad. And someone asked him how long he's been playing, and he said he's been playing 30 years. Mm-hmm. And it's he's still making the same mistakes, basic mistakes.
Yeah. And then, so when we talk about poker, let's say hand histories or any tech knowledge, a lot of the older people at the table can tell you the first thing is, I play poker for 10, 20, X amount of years. I know what I'm doing. And once they say that, it's pretty much there's no overcoming that barrier, because they've already established that they know. And the first stage to learning is that you have to recognize that you don't know, so that then you can start knowing. So, and that's where I think you will be able to improve a lot faster than some of the older people. So we'll dive right into it. Let's go with the hand history first, right? He sent me 2 hand histories back there before we talked, and so let's rehash the 9-9 hand. Mm-hmm. You want to go ahead and explain that hand out?
Sure. I had pocket nines. Someone straddled 10, and he's kind of like a loose, crazy player, and I was under the gun +2, and I raised 30, and a lot of people called, 4 people called or something, and then the straddler made it 110, I think.
Yep. Right there, so when we talk about hand history, then
it was an under the gun straddle.
And the effective stack you said was 500.
Yeah.
Because that's the most important thing, is knowing what the effective stack was. So he raised to 120.
Yeah, and I called hoping that everyone else would call behind me to give myself odds to set mine. One guy called, and the rest folded. And then the flop came 8, 9, 10. He went all in, I went all in, and the other guy folded. And the straddler had ace 10. So I guess he hit the flop decently well, but I flopped a set.
Yeah, so you won. So in a way, you got lucky.
Yeah.
So when I broke down this hand to Dylan, I basically told him he didn't have odds to set mine, because in general, the odds for you flopping a set is around 1 out of 8. But I tend to tell people multiply by 1 out of 10 because for the time that you do get set over set or something, you might lose. So then if you want to calculate your odds right away, you want to go 10. So let's say even if you have a caller behind you, then 120 times 10 is still 1200. So right there, your odds is not there already. So then let's say we call with pocket nines, and then on the flop, what flop would you be fist pumping if you didn't flop a 9?
Yeah, probably not a lot.
Yeah. So let's assume that you flop a 7 high flop, right? And it comes to you. What would be your action? Are you checking or are you betting?
Well, the pot was pretty big, so I'd probably just go all in. If the pot's like, I think goes 400, and I
Yeah.
have like 300 left or something, 350.
So you basically have to get it in, and then hoping that
Yeah.
somebody didn't flop a set.
Well, I'd be hoping. Well, if the straddler checked, I'd probably feel like I could beat him, and then there's the guy behind me. So hopefully I could just take it down if I shove. But I don't know. I mean, I was thinking the straddler might have like 10s or jacks or like an actual good hand, but he had ace 10. He could have had a lot of hands though. He was doing a lot of under the gun straddling and raising. So I didn't want to fold, but I probably should have folded.
Yeah,
It was
because
nice that the 9 came though.
Yeah.
In the window.
because let's say it comes to a low flop, and then he c bets. Well, you're still stuck in the spot of guessing. You have no
Yeah,
information, right? And then if it's a high flop or just a random low flop, and you bet and you get called, you're still lost. So in this spot here, when you call with a 9 and you don't flop, you flop all undercards, you almost have to get it in. But you're getting it in against a lot of ranges that either slightly behind you or way ahead of you. So this is the case where I tell a lot of people, you want to get your money in when you're racing or crushing versus racing or crush. And in this spot, if the money goes in, you're either racing or crush. You're not crushing anything unless you had that set of 9, like we said. So in this situation, I tend to fold pre-flop more, not because not because my hand is weak, but because post-flop you're gonna be put into a lot of tough spots, and you're not playing with the initiative. And in poker, to me, playing with initiative and position is way more important than the value of your hand, because then you can actually win the pots without your hand.
Yeah.
So that's very important. And a lot of your like young poker players who start out, they tend to see this hand as a strong hand, and they overplay their hand a lot because you see on TV where you can't be folding 9-9s pre-flop. It's too strong. So they tend to overplay and put themselves in a lot of tough spots with marginal holdings. And this is a hand where you want to keep the pot low, the stack to pot ratio low, so that on the flop you can make a lot of decisions and you can extract information with bet sizing. Whereas this was the pot
That was
was
a pretty big pot.
yeah. So let's see here. Your stack was you have left maybe 380,
Yeah.
and the pot was 240. So it's less than 2-to-1 stack to pot ratio,
Yeah.
which pretty much gives you no room to maneuver. So that's where you want to avoid these spots and don't get married to your hand a lot. And so then let's go to the second hand then, the ace queen hand where you explained to me. So let's go ahead and rehash that hand out.
Oh, the one I talked about earlier? Oh, well, I had ace queen offsuit and the low jack. And someone straddled 10, a couple people called. I raised 75, and then the button snap called, and he had been like one of the only people at the table, being pretty quiet relatively. And then the straddler called, and the other two folded. And the flop came ace king 5 or something with 2 diamonds, and I have the queen of diamonds.
Okay.
What happened?
And then you bet, you said 175.
Yeah, the straddler checked. I bet pretty big, like 150 or 175. Just hoping to get called by a weaker ace. And then the button called and the straddler folded, so now I'm out of position. And the turn brought a diamond. I bet 200. The button called, so now I'm pretty concerned. And then the river brought another ace, so it improved my hand, but I still think that I might be in trouble, so I checked. And then he bet like 480, and I just they called the clock, and I didn't know what to do, so they killed my hand.
So you said the button was more relatively quiet. You could say playing snug.
Yeah.
So then when he calls a big raise like that, you pretty much put him on a strong range. He's not floating, calling light.
Well, when he like snap called my raise, because it seemed like he wanted to raise, but then I raised, and I raised pretty big too, because I was hoping to get called. I mean, they were calling a lot, so I could raise to whatever with a big hand.
Yeah.
And then he snap called it, so I thought, I was thinking, he might have ace king. And then the flop came like ace king, whatever, and I kept on betting at it.
Okay. So let's go break it down then. On the flop, ace king, you said 4 with 2 diamonds. At that point, you range him. What are some of the ranges you put him on? Ace king?
Yeah, ace king, or maybe like ace jack, ace 10 suited, or like pocket jacks, pocket queens. And then I raised, or I bet really big on the flop, and he called me, and there were 2 diamonds, so I thought maybe he has like a flush draw. And then the flush draw got there, so really I wasn't beating a lot of hands that he could have had at the end, even though I had trips.
So why did you bet the turn?
Because I didn't want him to bet the turn, and then I'd have to guess, like, wait, does he have a flush, or... It was more like a blocker bet, but I guess I could have gone smaller, like the same amount probably, but... And when he calls the turn, most of the time I know that,
So let's say if you check the turn and he bets, what would you do then? The diamond came, so there's a flush on the board, ace king. You have the diamond blocker, so you take away and you have the queen.
I would have called because I had the queen of diamonds. I don't think the ace on the flop was a diamond. I think it was like king, 4, 5, all diamonds. So I had like the second nut flush draw, so I still would have called. And then I would have had trips on the river. I probably would have still folded.
Yeah. So the play was everything was correct. So the turn bet is where it was difficult, where you could also check call, so that because that way you protect yourself. But it's a tough one, and I think the way you played it is fine, because if you check call, then you pretty much you could give him a chance to bluff you. Whereas on the turn, when you bet there, you pretty much have him declare his range. Like there's no float, there's no weak hand. He's not floating you with ace jack. It's the only hand that you're hoping for. So I think the fold is a good fold, because you don't beat much. And like you said, if he was a like loose player pre-flop, then I would probably call. But the way you said he was playing snug, and you represented such a strong range, that I think the fold I think it was the better play.
Yeah. Well, shortly after that he left, which made me kind of think that he was like waiting for a big hand, and then he got his big hand, so he left. And he never showed what he had or anything.
Yeah. So then let's go to the 1-2 strategy then, because there's a play in there that actually calls on to some of the strategies that I told you. So I sent Dylan this 1-2 approach strategy, and so at 1-2 I tend to tell the players, you want to play an exploitative strategy versus a balanced strategy. Do you understand what's the difference between exploitative and balanced?
Yeah, well, at 1-2, a lot of people aren't paying attention usually. So, for example, if you have aces, you don't have to open to your standard open, because they might not know the difference. So you could just open to the amount that you could think that they'll call, and you want that because you have aces. Or if you have like 8-9 suited or something, you could just do a small raise.
Right.
Hopefully not get a 3-bet.
So
Since people aren't paying attention, you don't have to do weird stuff like 3-bet bluff with ace-5 suited or random stuff.
Correct. So that's why I tell people, 1-2 players, just play face up. Like if you have a strong hand, bet big. You have a small speculative hand, and you want to control the pot, just bet small. No one's gonna pick up on these tails, because they're just playing their own range. So and a lot of the players that try to play well at 1-2, they over adjust, and they try to balance too much, where you don't need to balance. You just
I guess some people take it too seriously.
Yeah. So let's see here. So and then I have step 1 is you have to identify identify your target so that you could get position on him. And so these are basically simple stuff that 1-2 players need to be cognizant of and work on before they develop too many different strategies. And like 3-betting, I pretty much tell the young players, you don't really have to 3-bet a wide range. You could just pretty much 3-bet aces, kings, ace, king, and sometimes queens, because at 1-2, even queens is, you could say, speculative, because the reason I don't want to 3-bet queens at 1-2 is because I don't want to open myself up to being bluffed by random players who just, like they have 300 and they just shove it in, and then you have to call, and then sometimes you're up against ace king and you're racing, where I think your skill set should allow you to maneuver post flop so that you don't have to get into racing spots with ace king. Of course, a lot of people are going to disagree because they want to extract value out of your queens, but for preference, I think in order to work on your skills and post flop and be able to outmaneuver the weaker players, it's better to take the queens and jacks out of your 3-betting range and put it into your flatting range, so that post flop you could have more room to play. Like on a low flop, you could actually re-raise the flop with an over pair, versus if you were to take queens and jacks and 3-bet them all the time, well, now you don't have a strong hand that you could do this unless you flop some kind of strong hand. So then your ability to apply pressure on the flop is less, because you've taken all your strong hands and you 3-bet them already. So these are just some and then flop c-bets. I tell Dylan, if you watch a lot of players on the higher stakes, their flop c-bet tend to be smaller on the smaller side when they don't have anything.
At 1-2, if you have like ace king, you raise, and a few people call and you miss. Every time I c-bet in that spot, I always get called because they're not folding their pairs or whatever. So now I just usually try to see a turn.
Yeah. Well, yeah, in that ace king, at 1-2, if pre-flop, if you're up against multiple callers and you have ace king, I think the better play is just to try to get to the turn if you can, because like you said, 1-2 players, they're calling station. They'll call you anything. Yeah. And your c-bet won't extract any additional information. Where if it's heads up, it's different. Yeah. So then your c-bet, let's say the pot is just random $100 and you c-bet $30 and you get called, well, chances are that his range is weak, because most low stakes player will re-raise you when they have any strong hand. They can't hold back and they can't trap and be played deceptive. So, and then on the turn is where you want to extract, where you start making your move and making the plans, where your bet will help you set up for the river bets. So, and now the most important thing that I tell 1-2 players is that they need to bet fold a lot. Like 1-2 players don't bet fold enough, because for many reasons. Like, what are some of the reasons that you don't bet fold?
Because I just really like my hand. I mean, that's what happens a lot of the time. Like, you could raise someone, re-raise someone, and if they've got like a good hand, like trips or something, it's really hard for them to let it go.
And it's because they don't range the opponents.
A lot of 1-2 players focus on what they have and not what other people might have. Yeah,
and so the term we want to apply here, the concept we want to apply is relative hand strength versus absolute hand strength, where you tend to don't want to look at your absolute hand strength, like on that ace queen hand. Absolute hand strength, you have trips with queen kicker, really strong hand. Yeah. But if you look at relative hand strength, what do you really beat on that board, right? You only beat ace jack, you lose to a lot of sets, a lot of flushes, you lose ace king. Yeah. So relatively, your hands are pretty weak, and this is very important for small stakes players to realize that you got to look at your relative hand strength versus your opponent. And in order to do that, you have to actually start ranging your opponents properly first. And that's also one thing that low stakes players don't do, is they don't actively ranged players. I tell my friends whenever they are in a hand to just kind of like mentally declare everything that they range, because you'll be surprised when you declare, okay, I put them on ace king, ace flush draws, ace set, prepare some. Then you actually start to see the board better when you actually do name these in your head versus just kind of waiting for the hands to play out. Make sense? So this is the technical part of poker, but I also gave Dylan some yoga exercises to do. Have you started it yet?
What's the app called?
Aloe Moves.
Yeah, I searched for it on the App Store. I'm not sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and it didn't show up.
Okay. So, do you know why I'm getting you into yoga too?
I don't know, so you don't go on tilt. Is that?
Yeah.
They connect.
Well, but also because I guess right now I assume you don't exercise at all. So your I guess your physical endurance is probably low, and your energy level tends to be low.
I guess I could have long sessions, but I can't like run 2 miles.
Oh. I encourage a lot of poker players to do yoga because there's a deep connection between yoga and poker actually, because the first thing is it, like you said, it teaches you how to not tilt, because with yoga, people think yoga is like some kind of exercise where you hold poses and everything, but yoga is actually an internal exercise where it's called moving with your breath with movement. Basically, you're moving with your breath. So when you do these kind of exercises, you're focused on your breathing and you focus on the present moment. And your mind's not being dragged away to some random thoughts or ideas. So this actually helps you. What's actually helped you maintain your breathing, control your breathing, so that when the time comes when you're on tilt or something, you can actually go back to this exercise of deep breathing, and it will help you to refocus and clear your mind and everything. And not only that, but in order to get better at poker or anything, train your mind, you have to put your body in position. You have to, so that you can train your mind. And if you're constantly feeling aches and pains, or you're not unhealthy because your body just lacks that energy and that stamina, it's hard for you to stay focused on and work on your poker game. So, and that's what a lot of poker players these days have struggled with, because the body's not in shape. And if your body's not in shape, it's hard for you to put your mind in shape. And poker, I tell people, is it's a training ground for training your mind. Have you heard about that yet, or does that make sense to you?
Well, I've heard you say that.
So, poker is a game of intelligence, right? So sometimes, unless you're gambling. So then, the skills of intelligence that you require to excel in poker is emotional control, logical deduction, perception. Reasoning. So these are stuff and observation. So these are stuff that you could train your mind each day, and as you do this, you actually get stronger. And if you get stronger at these, you actually carry these same skill sets to life, so that you can actually be a stronger person, a mentally fit person as well. So, and that's where I want to go to the goal of this whole thing, is that I think that we could transform you into an alpha male.
No, hopefully.
Do you? What's your perception of an alpha male?
Alpha male? I don't know. I don't really hear that word used seriously a lot.
So an alpha male is pretty much when you walk into the room, you're the man. You got that. You command the entire room, and you don't command them through somebody like you're like talking a big story or anything. You walk in because you carry the persona that you have a foundation for yourself. You're grounded. There's something within you that has been established, so that you are your own individual. Whereas most people, it's hard to explain. Where they're fickle. They one moment they're this and another minute at that. They have no control over their emotions or their ideas. And if you look at most of the leaders, they're alpha male because they don't lead from the front. They lead from behind. And you can tell because they encourage others and they support others because they're confident in their own ability and their foundation. And that's our goal is right now is because you're young, I assume you don't have a foundation yet. You haven't built a foundation. I assume you don't even know where you want to go yet or what you want to do.
Yeah, I don't really know.
So if we could use this right here, poker, to train your mind and then use yoga to train your body, and I think you will become a totally fit person as we go through this. And I think if we can show our audience that you can do this, then I think if anybody can do this. And the stuff we're going to work throughout this series is going to be very systematic and very practical. There's not going to be any theories. We're not going to hypothesize anything. We're going to give you work to do, and we're going to break down. And most of our work that we're going to do is going to be based on just breaking through the hand histories because a lot of poker players, I tell them they need coaching is because every individual has their own peculiarities. Your own leaks that only somebody that watches you can spot it. Otherwise, when you go and learn poker on your own, you learn the same thing that everybody else, but you don't learn anything about you. So it's different. So then you reach a certain point where you don't grow anymore because it's not personal. So hopefully this will be more personal and it will allow you to grow and transform. So
Or at least I won't go tilted.
do you tilt? Do you have a problem with tilt?
I used to, but not really anymore.
Why do you think you tilt?
Oh, I only really tilt if I lose a big hand, but my opponent played it well or outplayed me and they had a pretty good starting hand, then I don't really mind. But if there's some player earlier I had king queen, on a queen 7-5 flop, I raised, this other guy went all in, I called, and he had bottom pair and turn trips. I mean that's just annoying, so I left.
All right,
I can't beat those people.
That's actually important. Let's drill down. Why did that tilt you?
Because it's this guy, he's okay, I gotta see it all in. And he had garbage. He had bottom pair. He had 5-3 or 5 deuce offsuit, and he hit the 5, turn 5. So in your mind, there was some kind of injustice there, right? That's usually why people tilt, is because they perceive some kind of injustice, and that injustice is that he didn't deserve to win that hand. He shouldn't have won that hand. You played it well. You should have won that hand. So a lot of times we tilt is not because of, it's because of our perception. We perceive things incorrectly. So and then the second part is because of our expectations. We expect to win, and when it doesn't, we tilt. So anytime you start to get this, that feeling of tilt inside you, that your energy level start raising, and your head started feeling to explode or something, it's a good time to take a deep breath and then go back and wonder why are you tilting. And what you're going to realize is that your tilting is all because of your thought, the way you're thinking and perceiving things. Is because the stuff that you see is going to happen over and over, right? People are going to do things to you that you don't expect, or what you expect didn't turn out in poker and in life. Yeah.
So
people, my dad, he doesn't get tilted if he gets sucked out on. He gets tilted if he makes bad decisions. I get tilted when I lose to garbage hands.
Yeah.
Some other people get tilted when they lose big hands or something like that. So I guess people have different reasons. But
different reasons, or different, you could say, growth levels, where I'm like your dad. I get upset when I make bad plays or when I make a mistake as well, because then that shows that I wasn't focused, or I didn't pay attention or I didn't execute well. So that's something that's within me that I can actually work on and use this as a as a tool to, okay, move up, analyze my mistake. The tilt is actually a good moment because it brings us back to this moment, versus where if we don't tilt, we just move on. So the tilting allows us to wake up a little, and then we can use this moment to grow. Whereas if you tilt based on external things, then you won't be able to grow on it because it has no value. It has no value to you in terms of learning, right? So that's why I encourage people, when they tilt, they have to examine and be honest with yourself. Are you tilted because you didn't execute well and you play bad, or you tilted because someone else made you tilt? And if it's something external, then you have to realize that it's not real, and you got to just move on. Make sense so far? Let's see.
Well, what about that hand we had? We haven't talked about it, but we were playing 2-5, and some guy like raised 50 under the gun, and more than half the table called. So it was a pretty big pot. I had pocket sevens. The flop came queen, queen, 7. It checked around, and then on the turn, it was like a 10, I think. And at the time, I was thinking, if you got queens full, whatever, I'm not going to fold. And the guy who raised it pre-flop bet like 75, I called. You raised it to like 375 from the small blind. He folded. And I was thinking, like, should I jam, or hopefully he could bet again on the turn or at the river. And I called. And the river brought a flush, so maybe he put me on flush draw or something, but you check folded.
Yeah.
And I was disappointed about that. But
what do you think I had?
I don't know.
Because I checked twice. Right, I checked the flop and the turn.
Yeah. Well, you were like the first to act.
So I actually had queen 9 in that hand. So the reason I checked was because I told you, you want to develop your game around deception. Because if I bet out there, then it's kind of, and then I bet the turn, it gives away, it will give somebody a chance to run away. But if I did that against, like, I recognize you as a player, and I recognize the other player. So I wanted to strengthen my check raise so that when I check twice, people can't just barrel me off. But so when the flush draw came, the reason I check raised also was because of the flush draw. I wanted to, because if I bet out there, of course a flush draw will call, but nothing else will call. But if I check and a flush draw bet, I could also get him to call an extra check raise. But when I check raise and you called there, sirens went off right away. Because here's the thing, I knew that my image of you was a more conservative, on the tighter side, right? So for you to call a check raise on a paired board, I eliminated flush draw from your range already. I put the other guy on a flush draw, or maybe just a pocket pair trying to steal the pot because no one bet. Yeah. So his range was weak. I didn't worry about him. But when you called, I pretty much had the feeling that you either had a really big queen or you bolted up already. So my intention was pretty much to check fold all river, no matter what you did. It didn't matter because I already ranged you already.
See, I didn't know that. Because normally when the pot's that big and someone's re-raising, because to be honest with you, I wasn't really like paying attention to, obviously you were the one raising, but normally when an average player raises there and I like pretend to think about it and like I go all in or something, I almost always get called. Like sometimes I could just go all in with the set, playing 1-2, and the guy who bet like $20 is going to call most of the time.
I thought you played that hand well, because against a player like me who's more thinking, you want to disguise your hand. So by calling there, you could trick me into thinking you had a flush draw, so that on the river I could also make a crying call if the flush draw didn't hit, which actually we would have if you bet like maybe 20-30% of the pot. I don't know what you're playing. Yeah, so
see, I wasn't even paying attention to the flush draw because I was thinking, I have a boat, I don't have to worry about a flush.
Yeah, so you have to then, because that basically means that you didn't range me.
Yeah.
right? You just looked at the value of your hand and didn't arrange my hand. So if you put me on a set, then the call was good. You put me on, well, I'm not checking raising a flush draw. So back to where if you against let's say a thinking player, you want to disguise and float, and then on the river. But against, like you said, a weaker player who just a standard 1-2, you tend to want to raise there and get it in because he might put you on a flush draw, but he also might have a hand that won't fold. Whereas when the flush gets there, he'll be scared and fold. So and then you miss value. So I think it depends on who your opponent is and how you want to play the river. But the important there is you had position. So I tend to float in position because then it will allow me to make a lot of better decisions on the river, but it also allows me to play more deceptively. Make sense?
Yeah.
I think that's it. Do you have any more inputs or any questions before we end this first podcast? I think this is just this is a primer. I think as we go deeper, we'll probably talk about a lot more mental game and break down hands. But right now, because the reason one thing is right now you're playing mainly 1-2, right? And we had this discussion at 2-5 before, where at the 2-5 table, what was the discussion?
Yeah, we were having a lot of discussions. Well, whenever I play 2-5 here, it's because the rake is only like $3 or $4 an hour at 2-5. For some reason, that's weird because it's a bigger game, so it should have a bigger rake if the rake is different, but it has a smaller rake. And if you're playing like 100 or 200 hours a month, that adds up. But it's still 1-2 is better for me because I'm more rolled for it, first of all, and like at 2-5 I never like buy in for 1 or 2K, so I'm always in there short stacked. But I like playing 2-5 still. It's fun. But I think we were talking about what were we talking about?
I remember now. We were talking about why you should play 1-2 instead of 2-5, and the consensus people were saying why you should play 2-5 is that so you could play against tougher competition.
Oh, yeah, that guy was saying that you could learn better playing 2-5, which I kind of agree, in part because like at 1-2, you could pick up bad habits if no one's teaching you or anything. And a lot of times like 1-2 isn't real poker. It's like, whoever hits bet and I get called by a calling station. Whereas 2-5, you see more heads up and more actual play that you might see like on TV poker or something like that. Yeah.
So then my counter argument to that was, the problem with if you're starting out at 2-5 and you're starting out poker and you play 2-5 is that you start picking up concepts and then you misapply it. The biggest concept that people misapply first is the 3-bet.
Oh yeah, at 2-5 people 3-bet a lot to isolate, and someone might think that they need to start 3-betting a lot too.
Right.
Like queen 10 suited on the button, you might 3-bet.
And then they start thinking about, well, I have to balance my 3-bet and all that. So then they take it down to 1-2 where it's totally irrelevant. Because do you know why as you move up 3-bet increases? That the people do 3-bet more.
Why?
Because as you get up, player skill level get closer together. So then you get into a range war then, and then it becomes a game of isolation and position, and trying to get position on a certain player, and then isolating them and building the pot, and then it's range war. And so if you notice, even at 2-5, I don't 3-bet much because it's even unnecessary at 2-5. You don't need to get into range war, and you don't need to play isolation. And this is actually a topic where I discussed with some the bigger player like Kyle, who plays the stream game, and when he plays a 2-5, I tell him you're 3-betting incorrectly, because what he tends to do is he 3-bets the bad players out of the pot, and then he ends up getting heads up with the good player, where there's no value there. So like there was a hand where there was a bad player onto my right, so anytime he limped, I would raise, but I would raise small just to build a pot. And to an observant player like Kyle, he knew my raise was weak, so of course he 3-bet me on the button, and then the bad player fold and I just fold. And I look at him, I tell him, what are you doing, Kyle? You basically I'm weak. Like I'm only building the pot so that we could get value out of this. If there's this player to extract value from this player, if you let him make a mistake, but you basically push him out of the pot and you don't give him a chance to make any mistake. So then, if he limps, what am I supposed to do? Am I supposed to limp and not build a pot? Well, if I limp and I tell Kyle, you limp behind. If you fold, well, now we missed the opportunity to play a big pot. But if I raise small and I give away my hand, well, you're gonna 3-bet me, and so it ruins. So I tell Kyle, you have position, allow the bad player to come into the pot so that he can make a big mistake versus pushing him out of the pot and getting heads up with a pro. No value there. Yeah. And this is where a lot of misapplications of people 3-betting. They don't realize, they don't think about why they're 3-betting. They're just doing it because they saw it on TV, they have a certain range of hands, and they want, this is the hands that you should 3-bet for balance, for merge, or whatever it is, and it's just a total misapplication. And that's why when we had that conversation at the poker table, I told you just go down to 1-2 and work on the fundamentals first. Yeah, there's a lot of gambling, but you got to work on bet sizing. A lot of 2-5 players that move up too quickly, they have no sense of bet sizing. They don't know how to extract information. They don't know how to hand read, and they don't know how to set up their river play with their flop bet and turn bet. So these are all fundamentals that you have to consistently establish over and over. And with poker, at the beginning I told you I don't coach older players because they develop habits. So these are habits that you want to develop over time. Your flop c-bet percentage amount, and your turn, and then after a while, if you keep doing it, it becomes automatic. So that when you move up to 2-5, you don't have to think about these simple fundamental things anymore. It's in your game. It's like snap. You don't even, like raising aces, right? You don't have to think about raising aces. So you want to develop routines and habits so that when you move up, you could focus mentally on more difficult things versus thinking about bet sizing and position and all that. Make sense?
Yeah.
Cool. I think that's it. So we'll try to have a weekly conversation, and every time we have this we join this, we try to bring in 2 hand histories, and then we'll try to extract some kind of concept that we revolve around, and then we'll build up on that. So what concept do you think we should stress today?
What concept? We kind of covered a lot. So intro.
So I think the most important thing is that work on the fundamentals and bet sizing and building good habits so that you could build on top of that. And habits are built through iteration, one iteration at a time. And if you could learn how to build and develop good habits in poker, eventually you could use this kind of same thought process as you go through life, right? It's almost like driving a car. You build your habits through driving a car. So then anytime you want to get good at something in life, you know how to systematically apply this process of, okay, I start with fundamentals. I need to focus on this thing. And then as you keep doing it, iterating it, it becomes automatic. And then you move on to the next thing and next thing. And then you can get better at anything you want to. So, and I think this is gonna be interesting topic because people is gonna get to see how you transform through. We're gonna transform you through poker and make you a cool guy.
Oh, thank you.
It's gonna be fun. All right. Thank you everybody for joining, and we'll see you next time.